All right, pizza sauce. So what you're going to need is your imported Italian tomatoes. These I got at Restaurant Depot. You can get them at your local grocer. The big can is great because it's a 6-pound, well, it's called a number 10 can, and it's a 6-pound, 10-ounce can. So one can well drained is going to be enough for one 12-inch deep dish pizza, believe it or not, and you'll see in just a moment. But and I'll tell you a little bit more about why the San Marzano tomatoes, the imported Italian tomatoes, are my preference over domestic tomatoes. And I've got a list of brands in the recipe that you can, you should be able to find in your grocery store. You'll need your fresh garlic, your basil, your oregano, and your sea salt, and that's really it. It's a pretty basic recipe. If you don't have these things already prepared and portioned out, you're going to want to do that now. So I would say go ahead and pause the video and get all that done. And if you're wondering how much of each thing you need, well, there's actually a link in the description below where you can go ahead and you can purchase my recipe, and that has everything you need to know for this entire process. So I'm super psyched you guys are going to be making authentic deep dish pizza in your own home. This has been my, this recipe was something I worked on for a very long time, and it's just something that I just got to the point where I wanted to empower other people to make great deep dish pizza in their own home, fresh out of their own oven for their families. And it's a recipe you'll be able to pass, you'll have it forever, and you'll be able to pass it down generation to generation. You can open a restaurant for all I care. I don't really care. So, can of tomatoes, one full can. We're going to drain them in a colander. The larger the colander, the easier this will be for you. So San Marzano tomatoes, I did a lot of tomato taste testing, domestic and imported. And then there's San Marzano style, which is actually still made here in the U.S. And the thing about the U.S. tomatoes is that they tend to be more flesh and less gelatin, so that ratio of flesh and gelatin is not, it doesn't provide as much sweetness as you will get out of the actual Italian tomatoes. Not to mention, the domestic tomatoes have a ton more sodium in them, and I'll give you an example. If you buy, for instance, the Nina brand, which you can actually also get at Costco in these large cans, those tomatoes will have maybe 24, 25 milligrams of sodium per serving. This one, I think, has 50 milligrams of sodium per serving, and so that's also something to keep in mind when you're adding the salt to the recipe. You can adjust a little bit. Domestic tomatoes generally have, 250 milligrams of sodium per serving. It's an obscene amount. I've contacted a couple of tomato purveyors and I've asked why, and they say flavor, but I like to be able to control the amount of sodium in my recipes on my own. So the imported Italian tomatoes, the flesh to gelatin ratio, I think, is better, creates a sweeter, better flavor. There's less sodium, and the fact is they're much easier to work with when you're making your sauce by hand, the old-fashioned way, like I'm doing right now. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just pulling out any imperfections. Sometimes you get there's still some skin on the tomatoes. You want to pull all that out of there. And I'm very nitpicky about that. So anyway, I think we're good. Oop, here's a little piece of skin just hanging out. Sometimes you'll find that they're packed in puree and a basil leaf as well. So you want to pull that basil leaf out of there. And then you just get in there. And by hand. Now, traditional Chicago deep dish pizza, the sauce is just a little bit chunky. It's not thin, like a thin crust sauce. So I crush by hand because I like to get the exact consistency I'm looking for, and I think that's the best way to do it. You want to wear gloves, you can wear gloves. I'm making this for my family tonight, so obviously for you guys for the video, but also for my family, and they know I wash my hands, so I'm not too worried. And as I go through, I'm finding a few more bits and pieces of skin, and you'll find that as you crush and you do this, you'll find a little more pieces of skin and bits and pieces that you might want to get out of there. So once it's crushed, you're going to drain it again. You'll develop your own technique for all of this. This is the way I roll. Shake it, stir it, shake it, stir it, until it's pretty well drained. which is a good idea because when you bake the pizza, you don't want it too watery, making for a soggy crust. So, and basically what you end up with is this tomato, San Marzano tomato puree. So, there we go. And from there, we're going to add all our spices. Now, once again, you need to know how much of everything. You're going to want to go ahead and you can purchase a recipe in the link below. So I'm adding my garlic, my fresh garlic, fresh chopped, always the best. Oregano, basil, and sea salt. That's it. And then we're just going to stir it up. And then the nice thing, I always start with the sauce because it gives the sauce an opportunity to marinate for a while the dough is rising. And that's going to be next. I'm going to teach you how to make deep dish dough. You'll find that it is just not that difficult. All right. And there we have it. And now you have your deep dish pizza sauce. Simple as that. All right, now that you've got your sauce made and it's marinating, and if you're going to use it within the next couple hours, by the way, you can certainly just cover it and leave it out on the counter. I put mine in the fridge, and then I usually take it out after the dough starts rising the first time, which we'll get to in just a moment. So, what you need is your flour divided in half. You need your cornmeal, your yeast, your olive oil, vegetable oil mixture, and your warm water. Obviously, as stated in the recipe, 110 degrees is ideal, but you know, basically it should be pretty warm, not so hot that you can't stick your finger in it, but it should be pretty warm because you want it to dissolve that yeast. So you're going to dump in your yeast, followed by your warm water. Now what I like to do is take the whisk attachment and just stir it up just to get that yeast dissolved in that warm water. And I do that by hand, otherwise it kind of goes everywhere. Then you're going to take your cornmeal. Now next, the reason I add the cornmeal next is because the sugars in the corn will interact with the yeast, and if the yeast is good, you should see some bubbles in there, and I do. I know you can't see them, trust me, they're there. All right, now you're going to add half your flour. There's the other half. So we're adding half our flour. We are adding our oil. And we're going to get this going for about 10 minutes. All right, on speed number 1. That's it. 10 minutes. Now, one thing you don't want to forget, as stated in the recipe, you don't want to forget your salt. So, the measurements in the recipe, I've done this a few times. That's what I'm doing. So, this is going to go for 10 minutes, then we're going to add the second half of the flour with the dough hook to start kneading the dough. Why does it go for 10 minutes? It goes for 10 minutes because you want the gluten in the flour and the yeast to really get blended up and interacting so you get a really nice rise out of the dough. So, we'll be back. All right. After 10 minutes, what you're going to do is shake off the rest of this dough that's in here. Most of that off of there. A little bit on there, it's no big deal. If you want to pull it off, that's fine. You don't have to, it gets a little sticky. So what you're going to do now is you're going to add your dough hook, and you're going to add the second half of your flour, and you're going to let it go until it all combines into a nice sticky ball, which I'll show you in just a couple minutes. Okay, so we've been going a couple of minutes, and all the dough is combined, which you will see is all on the dough hook. Take it off. Now, some people will finish it off on the countertop, and they'll knead it on the countertop. I've developed my technique actually living in a small apartment in Chicago where I had no counter space. So I learned to do it like this. I'm just folding it over, kind of smashing it down. And this is the technique I use, but again, that was because of my circumstances. You can certainly put it on the counter and work it. And it should be pretty good not to stick to the counter since there's quite a bit of oil in this dough recipe. But I like to finish it off just to make sure I get the consistency, which really should be pretty smooth and nice dough ball. So I'll mix it up a little bit, kind of twist it up, and you'll develop your own technique. So don't worry about it. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And there we have a nice little dough ball. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover that with some plastic wrap. We're going to let it rise until it's double in size. We're going to punch it down, form that ball again, let it rise a second time, and then we'll be good to go and ready to use it. All right, so now the dough has risen, it doubled in size, punched it down, you let it rise again, and you're good to go. So, I'll give you an idea what it looks like compared to last time, as you can see. So here's, as they say in Italian, here's what are we going to do. We're going to oil our pan a little bit. Too little and your pizza will stick to the pan. Too much and you won't be able to work with it and spread it as you want to. So just a nice coating around the base and up the edges all the way around. Very good. Now gently take your dough, place it in the pan. And look, if you want to use a professional pan like this one, I have a link in my recipe to get you wholesale pricing, which is about 45%, I think, less expensive than if you buy the exact same pan on Amazon. Plus, there's a video on that page to teach you how to properly season your pan in advance one time of using it. But that's okay. You can also use a bake pan if you have one, a springform pan. You can use a cast iron skillet. That's a very popular way to do this as well. So whatever works for you. Being in the business, I've got a handful of these pans and I love them, and they'll last you a lifetime. So this one is this is aluminum pan. It's hard coated anodized, so it gives you a crispy crust on the outside and still keeps the dough and crust nice and flaky on the inside. So what you want to do is just gently work the dough out to the sides until you get right up into the edges. Okay, and it's pretty much even all the way around right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working from just off center. I'm going to start moving it more towards the edge to give myself a little bit of crust to work with that I'll be able to work up the edges. And I'm using this part of my hand right here. You'll develop your own technique, that's fine. Just hopefully you can see it's starting to work up the edges a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make more like a knife blade with my hand so I can tuck it right into the corner and continue to work it up the edge. Once I get all the way around, then I'm going to pull and pinch with my fingers so I get it all the way up high as I can. Now, again, this is a 12-inch pan with a 2 inches of depth. Obviously some pans are going to be tapered, some are, some cast iron skillets are tapered, some are straight edge like this one. I prefer the straight edge. There's a lot of options out there. So whatever you have you can work with. But certainly these I think are the most fun and produce the best product. So next with a deep dish pizza you're laying your cheese. I know thin crust, if you've made thin crust pizza the sauce goes next. Right now the cheese goes next. It creates a barrier between the dough, the sauce, and the toppings so you don't get a soggy crust. So you go one in the center, and then you're going to go around the edges, and you're using whole milk mozzarella, not part skim. You can use part skim, that's fine, but the whole milk provides better texture, in my opinion, and better flavor. It's just richer. So for this particular pizza, I'm going to be adding some smoked mozzarella, and you can play with goat cheese, you can use Taleggio, you can use Fontina. There's a lot of good melting cheeses out there, but I like to incorporate sometimes some smoked mozzarella. This pizza actually I'm making is going to be a spinach onion smoked mozzarella blend. Normally I do it with roasted jalapeno. That's my signature pizza actually, but my customers tonight, my parents, I won't say which one in particular, but she is not fond of jalapenos. So we've got our mozzarella and our smoked mozzarella. Now we're going onions. I like them sliced. You can dice them if you want. It's entirely up to you. I slice them because my favorite deep dish pizza has always been Pizzeria Due in the city, which is a sister restaurant to the original Pizzeria Uno. And Douay always sliced their onions, and so I just had an affinity for sliced onions. Uno dices theirs. I don't know. It's I guess you got to create your own way of doing it. So now we're going to add a little bit of spinach. You don't have to cook it in advance. A lot of people ask me that. And you're just going to put just enough to create a little bed of spinach in your pizza. Just enough to cover the cheese. Don't go too crazy, because obviously it would be very watery if you put too much spinach. If you want to cook it first, you can. Some people saute it with garlic and then put it on. I'm a fan of just putting on fresh spinach. Got to get your greens. All right, so now we're going to add our sauce, which we've had marinating for several hours, a couple hours really. And voila. And you can just pat it down. Work it all the way to the edges. And then we're going to grate some fresh Parmesan cheese on top. Adds a little bit of flavor. It looks nice. It also actually creates sort of it almost binds the pizza together. So after you're done cooking it, it's creating another layer that's going to hold help hold the sauce. Believe it or not, it has a function. It holds the sauce on top of each slice. So it's not, when you cut your slices and serve it, it doesn't all slide off. So it kind of holds it together, and it adds a little bit of flavor. And you just look cool when you're grating cheese. And you drizzle a little olive oil. And that's it. I'm going to throw it in the oven, and I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out in just a little bit. All right, so 30 minutes later, give or take. Ovens vary a little bit depending on, I don't know, I've got an old oven in Chicago and it varies, and I have to keep an eye on it with an oven thermometer. But this one here looks is right on time, and there you have it. So you need to let this set for about 5 minutes. If you cut into it right now, it's all going to be goopy and fall apart. So you want to let it set, let everything come together, and you can cut it up and serve it. So bon appetit.